If you take a minute to look back at the Legend of Zelda series, specifically Skyward Sword, you will more than likely see a lot of similarities between Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword. And in this video, I'd like to talk about those similarities and how they contributed to the creation of Breath of the Wild. Hey, what's up? D-Rock here with Zelda Theory. I hope you're doing well. Hey, if you are new and you find value in our conversation today, be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications for any and all things Zelda every single week. Real quick, I wanted to give a massive shout out to you specifically, as our Zelda crew just recently passed our first major milestone of 10,000 subscribers. Just saying that out loud literally gives me chills right down my spine, man. Wow. Just thank you. I don't want to drag this out too long, but I just wanted to say I am so grateful for this amazing opportunity to create valuable Zelda content for you, as I'm literally just like you, a Zelda fan making Zelda content for other Zelda fans. So that I don't get too emotional, let's just dive into our conversation. Thank you so much once again. When the Nintendo Switch launched, it did so with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild as a launch title. Obviously, right? Breath of the Wild earned near universal critical acclaim and is widely considered to be one of the absolute best video games ever made in the history of Nintendo and the history of any system, really. Its critical success translated into sales success, with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild standing tall as one of the best-selling games in the franchise. Now, before Breath of the Wild launched, some fans were skeptical, and if I'm being honest, so was I, about whether or not the game would be a success, based on everything that we heard about the game. The Legend of Zelda's track record is almost spotless, but Breath of the Wild made some major changes to the established formula. And I honestly think that saying major changes is an understatement, because they completely changed the formula. It abandoned the dungeon and progression structure established by previous games in the franchise, which embraced an open world design that offered a completely different experience. Breath of the Wild represented a major shift in the way Nintendo designed Zelda games. Honestly, there's no going back either. Its influence has left a lasting impact on not just the Zelda franchise, but the industry at large, let's be honest. There's no denying that Breath of the Wild is one of the most innovative Zelda games, and honestly, one of the most innovative video games, period. But honestly, I think you're going to be surprised to learn that the foundation for the game was actually laid by the very first entry in the series, Skyward Sword, which released 6 years earlier as an exclusive for the Nintendo Wii. So Nintendo itself recently pointed out some of the similarities between Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild. For the most part, these similarities are found in the two games' gameplay, with Skyward Sword introducing mechanics that would later be adopted by Breath of the Wild. Now, I think one of the most obvious mechanics is the stamina meter, which plays a major role in Breath of the Wild. Again, major being a severe understatement. In The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, the stamina meter is used to govern actions like Link climbing up walls and sprinting, for example. The stamina meter in Breath of the Wild plays a similar role, though it is a much more prominent part of the experience, if that makes sense. Since so much of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is about exploration, players have to manage their stamina way more often, and they have to regularly eat food or make up dishes that keep Link's stamina gauge built up. This wasn't actually really the case in the Skyward Sword. Exploration and the stamina meter are a massive part of Breath of the Wild, but all of the evidence is there that Skyward Sword originated this concept. Now, in Breath of the Wild, Link is able to upgrade the gear that he gets to make it extremely useful for combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. This is in stark contrast to most games in the series, which have featured static items that don't really change once Link actually has them. This is yet another gameplay mechanic that some Zelda fans may have believed originated in Breath of the Wild, but it was first featured in Skyward Sword, which is super cool because if you didn't know, we're getting a remake, remaster, don't shoot me, whatever, on July 16th of this year. Super dope, man. Now, in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, Link is able to upgrade his gear using various materials that he can find out in the open world of the game. Not the open world like Breath of the Wild, but more linear, if that makes sense. Now, if you're playing Skyward Sword, you can upgrade Link's trusty slingshot to a more powerful scatter shot if you have the right materials and rupees to get the job done. Now, this process is very similar again to Breath of the Wild, so it seems that yet another idea that carried over from one game to the next. A big milestone in the early hours of Breath of the Wild is when Link is able to get his sailcloth and safely leave the starting island, plateau, whatever you want to call it, from the beginning of the game. The sailcloth gliding item was another idea that was originated in Skyward Sword. Origin. Is it all clicking? Now, like the stamina meter, the sailcloth is a unique addition to traveling around in Zelda games. While Breath of the Wild made it more of a focus, it definitely owes some depth to Skyward Sword if you want to go there. I mean, it definitely does. Now, one of the main reasons why I wanted to make the comparison between Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword is that we are going to be getting a remake of Skyward Sword HD in the summer, July 16th more specifically, of this year. Now, based on all the research that I've done, there is a lot more of you that have played Breath of the Wild than Skyward Sword, and there's many reasons for this. But it stands to reason that Nintendo thinks that it can convince some Breath of the Wild enthusiasts like yourself to give Skyward Sword a shot by showing how the games are similar. All this being said, I think you should keep in mind that while there are definitely some similarities between Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword, the games are way more different than they are the same, and that is a whole nother video topic that I would like to touch on in the future. Skyward Sword is more of a linear, traditional Zelda experience with the dungeons that we all love and things of that nature, for example, whereas Breath of the Wild is completely open world, which is awesome too. At this point, to me, it's unclear if Skyward Sword is going to win you over if you loved Breath of the Wild, if you never played the original release on the Wii, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens when it launches on July 16th. Now, for more Zelda awesomeness, be sure to stick around and click on either of the videos coming up on the screen here in a few to dive into more Zelda content that I've covered on the channel. And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe, turn on all notifications, all that awesome stuff, and remember, it's dangerous to go alone. Click on another Zelda video right now. I'll talk to you over there.